everybody. Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling, and we've got to catch up with a lot of stuff that's happened over the last week in the world of sports entertainment and pro wrestling. A lot of cool things happened, a lot of crazy things happened, a lot of bitching went on, but so is the case for pretty much every week in pro wrestling these days. But before we get into any of that stuff, I want to let you guys know that I got a lot of free goodies down for you in the description box below. Things are getting very weird in the world in general, and money is getting tight. So if you want to start investing and kind of set some money aside and put some money away, you can get free stocks from Webull and Robinhood down in the description box below. Of course, that's kind of like free money. You can keep them and then save them and invest in them, or you can sell them and just get the cash and take it out. Also, we've got some free crypto from Coinbase and a ledger, the nano ledger that you can put your crypto on. I always suggest doing that as crypto is kind of coming back and kind of going away and kind of coming back. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, look at the links down in the description box below. But now let's talk about what's going on here with the world of pro wrestling and sports entertainment. One of the things I found very interesting, because it considers a promotion that I usually don't watch and don't talk about, and a lot of you talk about it a lot. I have put out feelers to see if anybody wanted to kind of take this on, but it is what it is. Impact Wrestling this past week had its big Bound for Glory pay-per-view. I highly suggest watching the match, by the way, with Will Ospreay and Speedball Mike Bailey. Absolutely fantastic. Definitely a match of the year contender if you haven't seen it. But the big thing that came out of it is that they had this whole skit and demo at the end of it, and it basically was the fact that Impact Wrestling, yes, is going back to being called TNA, Total Non-Stop Action again. I don't know if this is going to set the world on fire or not. I read some of the stuff that Anthem had put out about this whole thing, and I mean, I guess it could spark something. I don't know how much. I mean, I think for TNA fans and maybe some old school TNA fans, because TNA, Impact, NWA, TNA, all of that, even when it was called Global Force Wrestling or whatever that scam was with the gold thing, that whole thing, it's been around for over 20 years. Kind of wondering whether or not going back to the TNA logo is going to change anything at all for the promotion. I have heard that they are not bringing back the six-sided ring. It is just a change in the name, but pretty much all the champions are going to remain the same. They're going to rename the titles, get new belts, and all this other stuff. I also kind of wonder if Mr. Bro, if he's going to be booking again for TNA eventually at some point in time. I mean, that really was his the brainchild of Vince Russo, called Tits and Ass Wrestling, essentially. And some people wonder why I never really got into TNA, but yeah, TNA's back. The funny thing is, I also saw that this was originally planned, I think, for around 2019. And what they were going to try to do is split the TNA brand off as its own thing and Impact as a separate thing and have two brands. The pandemic kind of put a kibosh on that. And I'll tell you something else that probably put a kibosh on that, which was All Elite Wrestling coming and kind of stealing the thunder, because after you have AEW, now AEW has not only Dynamite, but Rampage and Collision. Having yet another wrestling promotion that has two brands is a bit much. I think it's a good idea for them just to go back to the TNA logo. Maybe it'll get some nostalgia. It's going to have to coincide with them doing some heavy marketing and with them really kind of rebranding themselves in the wrestling space to get some more eyeballs on their show. Well, I don't know. We'll wait and see. It's nothing for me, because I never really got into Impact or TNA, but I know a lot of people out there do. So I wanted you guys in the comment box below, let me know, what do you think about this? Do you like the fact that they're going back to TNA, or would you rather them continue on with Impact Wrestling the way that it's been? WWE had a crazy week. The rumors going around about John Cena possibly retiring. Of course, Roman Reigns is now back. The Tribal Chief is running the roost again, and he's got a new challenger in the LA Knight. That's going to be curious. They're doing it at a Crown Jewel show. I think LA Knight is probably going to be one of the breakout stars of the year. He might be the breakout star of the year on a lot of people's list. It's going to be, no one expects him to win this match, but it is something that the character does need in order to kind of lift the character up. These kind of matches, when they come around with a guy who's hot and new, you want to put him in that world title match to see if they can hang at that level. Very rarely do you get it. I mean, like, the only time I can think, the last time I can remember, was like a Kazuchika Okada, and that was kind of just shot out of the cannon. They just put him as world champion, but very rarely does that happen. Usually, like with Stone Cold Steve Austin in his first shot at the WWF Championship, like Kenny Omega, John, even John Cena. A lot of these guys did not. Well, I think John Cena did win on his first try, but a lot of guys who were number one guys, they don't usually win the first time. You want to see if they can hang in that position and that level. I do expect LA Knight to be kind of the similar thing, especially considering it's Roman. If it was LA Knight against Seth Rollins, I might think a little bit differently. They might crown LA Knight and might put LA Knight over Seth Rollins, but against Roman's championship reign has to end in a big major event. It's got to end at a WrestleMania at this point, as long as it's been and as epic as it's been. And it's got to be somebody that the fans are behind LA Knight, but I think Cody, Jey Uso, or Sami Zayn are the ones that defend, far more less now Sami Zayn than anybody else. But I think that's what people really want to see. Endeavor did crown Triple H as being the sole head of creative. Vince McMahon and his issues and people are attributing this to the TKO, which is what the WWE stock is called now. People have said that a lot of that has to do with the TKO stock dropping. I know Ari said that was Vince was part of the reason that the stock dropped, but the market as a whole has been dropping for the last couple of weeks. I always think it's funny when wrestling people talk about WWE stock and they go, "Oh my God, this thing completely dropped," completely oblivious of the fact that, wars and recessions and interest rates and what the Fed chief says has probably more impact on the stock dropping than anything else. But I will say Vince's involvement probably did have a little bit to do with that. And I think the announcement of them, saying that Vince is not going to be in creative at all. The creative control is now entirely in the hands of Paul Levesque. I think that's a brilliant move. Paul Levesque has done a bang-up job. And I've said this in the past. I think we all said this in the past. Remember back 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, when Triple H was running NXT. That was that time era, if you remember, where everybody was saying, well, not everybody, but a lot of us who watched NXT said, NXT is better than the main roster. And we were all waiting for Paul Levesque, Triple H, to take over the main roster, so the brilliance that was on NXT during its black and gold days, we could see on the main roster, and WWE would be unstoppable, and that has proven to be true. And it's a bit of a parallel to how Vince originally started, because Vince's father gave Vince the, I think it was the Capitol Arena or whatever it was. He gave Vince a small chunk of the WWF's overall territory to run, and then eventually, if he did well with that, he could run the whole business. And the same thing seems to have happened here with Paul Levesque, who ran NXT, and now he's running the whole thing. It's interesting how history repeats itself in reality, but that's pretty cool. I mean, WWE is still on fire. They've got a lot of stuff coming up. The Survivor Series is coming up. The big rumor about Survivor Series is not that CM Punk is showing up in Chicago. They're in fact trying to kind of put out a lot of counter statements that say no, that do not come to this show expecting to see CM Punk, despite how many times people on the internet and on YouTube channels and on dirt sheets had said a couple weeks ago that it's all pretty much a guarantee, it's a sure thing, and now all of a sudden we're hearing that WWE's like, no, not at all. None of these people know. So if WWE is putting, if it's coming, this is coming from WWE, if they're trying to put out that the only thing that they said about it is that no, he's not going to be there, and they're doing it because they don't want people to go to Chicago and chant CM Punk all night long. I think that's probably an indication he's probably not going to be there. But the big return that is being anticipated is, after all this time, the Viper, Randy Orton, is probably coming back. They said it's slotted for that weekend. That's the rumor that's going around right now. And Randy Orton coming back to the WWE is going to be one of the biggest returns of the year, because Randy Orton's been out. He's been out a long time. He's been out so long that his partner, Matt Riddle's not even in the company anymore. So what's Randy Orton going to do when he comes back? Is he still going to be wrestling? That injury was pretty nasty. He's been out, like I said, he's been out for a long time. So I'm going to be happy to see Randy come back. Randy had gotten, before he got injured, people used to call him Blandy Borton and Boring Randy. Randy was boring because he did the same thing over and over again and looked like he didn't have any fire. Kind of funny because it's kind of the same way people talk about Kazuchika Okada recently and over in New Japan. Like, he was really great at one point in time, and now he's just kind of doing the routine. And Okada and Randy Orton are kind of similar in some ways. But now, at that last little bit, mustache Randy Orton with uh, Matt Riddle and all the stuff they were doing, and even the early stuff they were doing against the Bloodline and stuff like that, Randy Orton had reached this kind of level where everybody just kind of like, yeah, he's one of the GOATs. Yeah, he's one of the best of all time. So I think he's going to get even more of a response. And hey, who knows? Maybe Randy Orton's the one that's going to beat Roman Reigns. I thought that 2 years ago when they started this and WWE was starting to get good again. I was like, it seems like Randy Orton would be the person to go against Roman. They never did that match because Randy got injured. So who knows? Who knows what we're gonna see from the WWE? But it looks like WWE is rocking and rolling, setting records, and the next couple of months should be very, very interesting because at Survivor Series, you know what that means. We're going to start the road to WrestleMania. That's really when the road to WrestleMania starts because we're setting up for the Royal Rumble. So they've picked out, I would think they've figured out who they want to win the Rumble, how they're going to do the Rumble, and then lead on to WrestleMania. So we're about to enter the hot season for WWE, who's already on fire. So I can't imagine how big they're going to get. They are on a roll, man, and you got to give credit to them whether you like them or not. You got to give WWE credit. They've really pulled it together the last 2 years. Final note about AEW. One of the biggest things that came out this week about AEW is that Sting has announced that he is going to be retired. He's officially going to be retiring. Had this whole promo, and I watched that promo, and he reminded me, he name dropped him winning his first world championship against Ric Flair at the Baltimore Arena. Yes, I was there. As I remember, I was a preteen when that happened. That's how long back that was, because I'm old as dirt now. And I remember watching Sting beat Ric Flair in the Baltimore Arena at the Great American Bash. And Sting at the time was my favorite wrestler, so that was a great moment for me. But to go from that and now to see him, Sting's another one of those wrestlers, by the way, to speak about the LA Knight thing. He didn't win the world title on his first run, but that match with Flair put Sting on the map, and Sting mentioned that in this promo package. But he did announce that Revolution 2024, which I believe is in February for AEW, is going to be the final match of Sting. Who is it going to be against? We got a lot of time to get there. There's a lot of possible candidates. They're going to handle this right. I think if Sting is running this thing, he's going to handle it right. The great Muda's trying to look to get a check on this too. Muda wants a check. So, expect to see the great Muda show up at some point in time in the next couple of months on AEW as Sting's heading to his retirement, because Sting helped Muda out and his retirement tour. So I think we're going to see some fun stuff from Sting. We're going to see the last few things that he can think to do, that he can do against opponents that he could do them against. We're going to see them coming up. A lot of questions about Adam Copeland and his impact on wrestling, his impact on AEW in particular, and people really speculating about, like, wow, look at the ratings, look at the attendance, all this other stuff. AEW had a bit of a bump in attendance and ratings this past week. I think they were over 900,000 again this past week on Dynamite. But the thing that I think we have to keep reminding ourselves is, and I have to remind myself, I don't know where the younger fans get this from, but for us old school fans, it is a transition from back in the day when it was the wrestlers who were the draw. The wrestlers were the draw above anything else. In fact, you really didn't, I don't want to say you didn't care at all about the company that it was, but it's like you were going to go to see the wrestling show. If it was NWA, whatever, it was wrestling. And the WWF had the cartoony wrestling, the NWA had the more serious wrestling, and that's the way it was back then. But it was Hulk Hogan, it was Ric Flair, it was the Road Warriors, it was Dusty Rhodes, it was Macho Man, Roddy Piper. Those were the names were the draw. Of course, after the Attitude Era, that's when WWE switched and have carefully gone to, it's not about the wrestlers, it's about WWE itself and the WWE universe and the WWE this and the WWE that, and the production that only WWE can provide, which is very true, and that's why they are where they are. It was a clever business move. The point of me saying that is that we've seen it with Mercedes, we've seen it with Adam Copeland. Now, you do have guys like MJF, like CM Punk, like Roman Reigns, like John Cena, who still can pop a rating. But as far as changing the direction of a wrestling company or improving its viewership, you can't, it's not like in the old days where, if WCW got Hogan and they got, Savage and they got Hall and they got Nash and they got all those guys that eyeballs followed them. It's not the same anymore. It's not like it was back then. That's why the WCW WWF war worked in that era during the Monday Night Wars, because then it was, oh no, it's Hulk Hogan. It's like, we're gonna go watch Hulk Hogan. He's on WCW. We're gonna watch WCW. It ain't the same way anymore. Adam Copeland fans, a lot of people who claim to be Edge fans, even though Edge is in AEW, it doesn't look like a lot of those eyeballs transitioned over. I have to imagine, I don't know, but I have to imagine for some of the WWE wrestlers, I have to imagine, and when you're in that bubble, you get your head pumped up so big about how big a superstar you are, and then you leave, and then you go somewhere else, whether it's Impact, whether it's New Japan, whether it's AEW, and there isn't this big surge of an audience that comes with you. I think that has to be somewhat demoralizing, and maybe somewhat of a reality check for the people in the wrestling world and the wrestling business and the wrestling community to kind of understand what has been done to the industry. It's not about you guys anymore. It's about brands, not about the wrestlers. And I don't know how the wrestlers feel about that, because it ultimately means they have less control. Even though we have two companies that you can get paid millions of dollars in now, it's still you having a lot less control, and the wrestlers having less control and influence than the promoters have. And the promoters always had a lot of influence and control, but wrestlers at least had that. Like, if you're Roddy Piper, you can go, oh, I'm going to go work in Connecticut, or I'm going to go work down in Georgia, and it's going to matter because I'm going to take people with me. Not so much anymore. I think the only people, again, with the power to do that these days is Roman Reigns, John Cena, The Rock. I'm thinking of anybody. I think those are the only guys. If they went to AEW, it would matter in the numbers. I can't think of too many people else. Like, I don't think Sheamus going to AEW, or Braun Strowman, or Sami Zayn, or Kevin Owens, or the Usos, or AJ Styles. I say this, but I don't think Seth Rollins, any of those guys, if they jump over to WWE, you wouldn't see a big pop in the ratings. I think the only guys who would do that would be Roman and Cena, and maybe a handful of other people. Which brings me to the final point, and this is gonna be a much longer video, so I'm gonna save it for a much longer video. But there's been a lot of discussion about why AEW is falling behind. They've got 1/3 of the audience that they went from having 2/3 of the audience roughly that WWE had, now to having 1/3 of the audience the WWE has, both in ratings and in attendance for their shows. And a lot of people have been spinning it up, and a lot of people are talking about storylines and storytelling, and I chuckle at that because, as some of you know, I am actually an author. I actually have a lot of books that are available on Amazon, and a couple of them have actually been bestsellers. So writing, storytelling, this is the one area where if some of you know, I will say I can't tell Vince McMahon how to run a wrestling business. I'm not going to tell Tony Khan how to do it because I don't know. I'm going to tell Kenny Omega or Roman Reigns or John Cena how to wrestle. This is one area where I think I probably can critique, and not only critique Tony Khan and anybody else booking wrestling right now, but maybe also critique some of the people who keep bringing up storytelling as a reason that AEW is sagging in the ratings and the reason why WWE is surging. They're not wrong, but I think they're confused as to what storytelling actually is from some of the things that I've heard. So, and since nobody's really ever who says that really ever explains what they mean by storytelling, I think it would be worth doing a video to examine the fundamentals of storytelling, because I know a lot of wrestling fans probably don't bother to ever look at that stuff. So maybe, and not just wrestling fans, a lot of people in general don't bother to look this stuff up. But maybe as an author myself, I should do a video to explain some of the fundamentals and point at some things that are fundamentals of storytelling that AEW might not be doing or may be doing right, and that WWE is not doing and may be doing right, and put that in the context of how it applies to the wrestling world. Because writing a novel is not the same thing as writing a wrestling show or booking a territory or coming up with long-term storytelling in pro wrestling, but there are some basics that are universal among storytelling that I think are being missed out in some of the storylines we're seeing today, and it might explain some of the things that are going on today. So if you're interested in that video, hit the notification bell down in the description box below so you know when that video comes out. I'll be releasing it later this week. But I want to know what you guys think about these stories. Do you think AEW is down because of storytelling? Do you think that the wrestlers are as important anymore? Can anybody pop a rating besides Roman and Cena Anybody going to be a sea change anymore if they jump from one company to the other? Or is the Adam Copeland thing what we can expect in the future of wrestling? And what do you think about Impact Wrestling now going back to total non-stop action? Didn't think I'd see that one coming, but let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until next time, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and commentary on the Rant and Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.